Okay, and we're live on all platforms right now. Arnold, I don't know if on your technology there, if you can see the comments section. Probably not,
Oof.
eh?
No, not
Okay,
right now.
I've got it here. I've got everything feeding into the comment section, so I'll be able to monitor that and
Okay.
see if anything
I've
interesting
got the
comes up.
comment section on the Facebook video. Um,
Okay,
in fact, that's one of them. So I
okay,
we'll see. Let's see.
perfect.
So it's been fun to watch from my perspective, the Buffalo Tribune come into its own, so to speak. So
Yeah, it's
congratulations, Rob.
well, we're having a lot of fun. It's I've been doing commentary for about 3 years now, and
Okay.
I got it. I started from zero and just got interested in politics and stuff, and met some really good people in the process. And here we are today. We've got a bit of a media outlet on the go, and we're doing regular streams and getting lots of good messages out there. So we're really enjoying ourselves with it.
Super. And I love your background. It's the salvaged wood Canada flag.
Yep. Yeah, I actually I made those for a while, and I was selling
Okay.
them and donating money to Wounded Warriors when I had the time to do it,
Okay.
and that was actually the very first flag I made.
Okay.
Is the one that I
I
have.
got to tour the Wounded Warriors headquarters a couple
Mm,
of years back, actually. So it's
nice.
not anything fantastic there, but it's just an office building. But they do amazing work. So I was in the
Yep.
area and I set up a meeting with them. It's one of the benefits of being a member of parliament is that your phone seems to work better than everybody else's. So when you phone somewhere, they pick it up and they answer.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I think we've got a good group of people in here now. Just to before we get started, as far as everybody watching, if you want to support the work that we're doing with the Tribune and my personal blog, Rob Boutilier, please share this stream. Just share it to your pages. The more shares we get out, the more the message we can get out, and that's the best way to support us right now. So I just want to introduce our guest tonight, Arnold Viersen. Arnold's been doing some excellent work on the human trafficking front, and that's the conversation we're going to get into tonight. And I guess, Arnold, I'll just open it up to you if you want to just give everybody a little bit of your background, your area of coverage, and anything interesting about yourself.
Well, thanks, Rob. Yeah, my name is Arnold Viersen. I'm the member of parliament for Peace River Westlock, which is a large chunk of northern Alberta. I got elected in 2015. I'm the father of 5 children, and I'm an auto mechanic by trade. So I hung up my coveralls one day and got elected. Makes me a bit of an odd duck in Parliament, but nonetheless, my friends always bug me. They say, Arnold, there's not a wrench big enough to fix Ottawa, and I said, well, guys, we got to try. We got to try.
Oh man,
So
that's
yeah.
quite the jump. Automotive to politics.
Yeah. Fixing people's problems every day, I suppose. But yeah, it's the results are a little less tangible where I'm at now. It takes you work on stuff for years and years before you see some movement on it. But whereas when you're an auto mechanic, often in the morning you seen the problem, and a couple hours later you had it fixed. Right? It was more tangible that way. But yeah, for sure.
Yep. What pointed you towards politics from automotive mechanics?
Oh man, well, probably similar stuff as you, I guess. I just got frustrated with the way things were going. The just the general sentiment of the country and its attitude toward Alberta was probably one of the biggest motivations. The other piece was firearm politics. I actually we had YouTube was like I remember when YouTube started, right? So I'm old, I guess, but we when YouTube got started, then we installed a computer in our coffee room at work, and we would watch these YouTube videos from Rod Del Tackett, and now he's gone on to start CCFR. But yeah, so that like the frustrations around owning firearms in this country was a big motivation as well. And then just wanted to bring like um, just wanted to do some work on the social side as well, bring a social conservative voice to Ottawa. And so those three things motivated me to get involved in politics. I never thought for a minute my name would be on the ballot, but here we are 6 years later, or almost 6 years later, and I'm still having fun.
I find the political scene interesting because you kind of start out like I started out PO'd. Like it was just I was just sick of the treatment of Alberta, and that was kind of when the NDP came into power. There was a lot of frustration there with them and the Liberal government.
Yeah.
And but once I got interested, man, did I ever start noticing a lot of stuff. And it went from this broad interest in Alberta and how it's being treated to just general rights and freedoms overall. And being on the sidelines for most of my life, I never realized how often people are attacking those things. They're attacking our rights and our freedoms and trying to take them away from us. And man, the last few years has opened my eyes to it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like politics matters, right? And people that say, oh, I don't like politics, it's like, well, you might not like politics, but politics at some point is going to like you, right? And then it might be too late. So yeah, that's probably that's why I got involved. That's why you got involved, and I hope that I always say the more auto mechanics we put in here, maybe we'll get it fixed eventually.
Well, and what I appreciate about what you're doing is you put your money where your mouth is. It's unfortunate, the political scene, that the political forum is our battleground. That's where we make change happen. Yeah. And as much as some Canadians and Albertans don't like that, that's our mechanism, we've got to use it. And again, the more people we get who are genuinely, not career politicians, who are genuinely ticked off about what's happening, I think the more change we're going to get. And, it's you just bring credibility and trust with you when you come from that background, right?
Yeah, that's what I hope anyways. So
yeah. So just, I want to get into some of the good work you've been doing, Arnold. I mean, we could talk about broad Alberta and Canadian politics all day long, and I tend to do that. But specifically, you've taken a big bite out of the human trafficking piece in Canada. And it's something, listening to some of the stuff that you've had to say and some of the stuff that's been pushed through here, and then the conversations around Mindgeek and everything, we'll get into that. It's something that I don't think a lot of people are cognizant of. I don't think a lot of people are noticing what it's doing to people within Canada and how it's affecting some of especially our minority communities. So just to get us started, I don't know if everybody's familiar, but the whole Mindgeek Pornhub situation. Do you want to walk us through what happened there and what your involvement was?
Yeah. So back when I first got elected back in 2015. I had the opportunity to bring forward a private members bill. I was chosen number 37, which is like a once in a politician's career opportunity. And I don't know if you remember the Rehtaeh Parsons case. She was a 14-year-old girl who was raped at a party. And the boys that perpetrated this act, they were so proud of it that they took videos of it and they posted it on their Facebook page and they shared it on social media. Rehtaeh eventually committed suicide when she was 17 years old because of the whole ordeal. And I just remember that being a compelling story that was on the media. It captivated all of Canada at the time. And so when I had an opportunity to bring forward a private members bill, I chose that was the situation that I wanted to try to tackle. And it came to, we settled upon, I spoke with Rehtaeh's mother and a whole bunch of different organizations from across the country, and we settled on studying the impacts of online sexually degrading and explicit material in Canada. So that motion called for the Health Committee to do a study. That motion passed unanimously through the House of Commons. The study took place, and that kind of set me on the path of tackling this online sexually explicit material and the effects that it's having on Canadian society and who are the players and all this kind of thing. So prior to that, I'd never even heard of Pornhub. Back in 2015. But it came more and more aware of it through that study that Pornhub is the largest player on the internet in terms of the online sexually explicit material. And so I was working on, for the last few years now, working on meaningful age verification, making sure that kids that are online aren't being targeted with this material, so that if you're online, the companies are gonna have to make sure that underage kids aren't getting onto their sites. The other thing was, and I looked to the UK, the United Kingdom has done a lot of work around this as well, and they've brought in meaningful age verification and also opt-in legislation. So when you buy a device, most of the devices have filtering material or filtering mechanisms on them already. You just have to click them to turn them on. Except for, I don't know about you, Rob, but when I buy a new device, I just turn it on and I want it to work immediately. I don't spend a lot of time going through all the settings and clicking things on and turning things off. And so in the UK, they just said, hey, we're going to make it so that this default is going to be off. And if you want online sexually explicit material, you have to go into the settings, find the setting and turn it on. So it's opt-in basically. And those are kind of the two things that I was pushing for through that, to try to tackle this whole like online sexually explicit material thing. What came more out of it than I was even pushing was like the other side of the screen. So I was trying to protect kids on my side of the screen, the viewing side of the screen. But what came out more and more is that the largest online sexually explicit material company, Pornhub, actually was not spending a lot of time worrying about what was on their side of the screen, whether those kids or those people were of age and whether they were actually consenting to it. And so that those stories started coming toward me over and over again. People that would show up and say, hey, Arnold, my video was posted on Pornhub and I was underage and I had to pretend to be my own lawyer. I had to pretend to be my mom and threaten Pornhub in order to get my video taken down. And so that's kind of the big news that broke. We called for, back already in March of 2020, we wrote a letter to the Prime Minister saying like, hey, this is the case with this Canadian company. Pornhub and its parent company Mindgeek is based in Montreal. We said, hey, this is the situation. Underage people are having videos that they never consented to being posted up on this company's website, and the company is like odious to do anything about it. Besides that, this content's illegal. Child pornography in Canada is illegal. Why is the government doing anything about it? So we wrote a letter back in, March of 2020 to that effect already. So that's kind of the short history and how we got involved with all that.
Yeah, and what was the response to the letter and to the engagement with the federal government on this subject?
Well, initially, like already back in 2017, it was a little bit frustrating with the committee did their report, and the government came back and had to respond to that report already. And at that point, they said, "Hey, we do gender-based analysis on everything that we do, so we're awesome, and we've got it handled." That was they kind of just shrugged it off and ignored it. In the March of 2020 as well, we just really didn't hear much response. So I had 6 caucus colleagues that signed that letter with me, and so it was starting to build a little bit. Then we wrote another letter in November 2020, and that one I had 20 members from all parties that signed that letter. And that spurred on an article in the New York Times called "The Children of Pornhub," and that really like blew the whole issue wide open. The next morning, the Prime Minister was being asked about this company in Montreal and did he know about it and what was he going to do about it and all this kind of stuff. So that really like lit the fire, so to speak. And then the Ethics Committee undertook a study. Relatively quickly, they started a study there as well, and we actually had the executives of Mindgeek show up at committee to answer for why is there child porn on their sites? Why are there people that have never consented to having their videos up on their site and having to threaten them with lawyer letters, and why do they have to go to Cyprus in order to serve them, and these kinds of things. So it's been an interesting journey to travel. This story isn't new. It's just that, like, I've been pushing this for now 3 or 4 years, and Mindgeek has profited off of the exploitation of underage women and non-consenting women for years. It's just that it's finally coming to light in the public consciousness, so to speak.
So when you had those executives and they were being asked questions, what was their take on it? What was their perspective on the whole thing? Because that's one thing that really jumps out at me with this stuff is you look at the woke culture machine and how quickly they mobilize on the smallest thing. And the fact that we've got this happening within Canada, we've got evidence of it happening, and the feds are spending time doing studies, and from what I gather, there's been a level of defunding of the sexual exploitation programs and human trafficking programs. Like, why can't that woke machine turn on the things that need to go away? Like, I just don't get it, Arnold.
Well, we say that all the time. We're like, the like internet censorship, right? As you and I are probably somewhat concerned about internet censorship, and it seems to be extremely effective when it's Candace Owen or the gal from the Star Wars movie or whatever, right? Like, it's like very easy, quickly, like J.K. Rowling's another prime example, right? Very quickly she gets scrubbed from the internet and canceled and everything like that. And yet, misogynist, racist, all of this kind of stuff on Pornhub, not a peep, right? And that's I shrug my shoulders around it as well. I'm confused. I guess I don't really understand the woke machine to begin with. So no answers here on that, Rob. But it is interesting, and that's been those are the angles that we use often. It was just like showcase it and say, all right, where's the woke lot on this one, right? But to that effect, at the committee, we first heard from some of the victims. Miss Velitis, for example, and she was 14. Her boyfriend badgered her for nudie pictures, and then they ended up on Pornhub, and she went from one school to the next only to have those images follow her around. And she wrote letters. She impersonated her mom. She has hundreds of emails that she wrote to Pornhub to try to get this stuff taken down, and she was never able to get it taken down. And Pornhub, their whole business model is on like quantity of content, and so they spend zero time trying to, like, even after she would say like that she got them to take the video down, they would just like block the video, but all of the everything else around it was still there. The description and the tags and all that kind of stuff was still there. Plus, they would shoot it to other channels, like multiple platforms that they have. Pornhub being Mindgeek's largest one, but Mindgeek owns a host of sites and companies around the world, and their whole business model is extremely murky and untraceable. And like we said, if you want to serve them with a lawsuit, you got to go to Cyprus.
Yeah.
So
and the amazing part, Arnold, is I heard more about canceling Dr. Seuss in the media.
Yeah.
And people being proud of that than actual child sexual exploitation. And it really sounds to me like these executives, I'm kind of getting the vibe that they're shrugging their shoulders saying, it's a problem. We'll deal with it. Like, it doesn't sound like there's any real urgency to solve this issue.
Well, they seemed quite smug when they were at committee about the whole thing. They've made lots of money off of this, and so that seems to have bought their conscience, so to speak. But they also have. It was interesting when the December 4th article in the New York Times broke. The MasterCard and Visa both initiated an investigation, and then within 3 days they severed their relationship with Pornhub because they found there's obvious illegal activity on the website. Subsequently, Pornhub removed 80% of their videos, over 10 million videos that they removed off their website. So it was, it's been, it took MasterCard 3 days to make that decision. There is also now class action lawsuits in Canada and the United States against Mindgeek and Pornhub. And we've also started writing letters to the RCMP just asking, like, hey, how come MasterCard, it took them 3 days to find illegal content, and MasterCard and Mindgeek and Pornhub haven't seemed to have been investigated or charged, right? Like, so this is, but yeah, prosecution or like investigative direction does come from the Justice Department, and so we've been pushing that with the Justice Minister as well. That was our letter on the end of November there. That was what that was to say, hey, can you start investigating this? So yeah.
Now, when we talk about priorities of the federal government, and I know the provincial governments have a part of this as well, I guess, and I don't have any visibility into it, but what kind of funding is there to fight human trafficking within Canada? How well are we equipped? How well are we funding these groups that are supporting these people? Like, are we actually spending any amount of money that's going to make a difference on this?
Well, the Ontario government and the Alberta government. The Ontario government recently announced $300 million for their human trafficking initiative there. That was substantial. The federal government has as well, and yet some of the key organizations that I thought should be funded haven't received funding. So it's interesting. The Human Trafficking Task Force was a Conservative government initiative, and its funding ran out in 2017, and then it went unfunded for 2 years, and then the federal government started funding it again. But they changed the priorities of it a little bit, and so some of the key organizations are no longer funded. It has not seemed to be a big focus of the federal government in the same way as it was for the Conservative government in the past, and also for both the Doug Ford government and Jason Kenney's government have both spent a significant amount of time and money and effort on battling human trafficking in their respective provinces. And Quebec as well. I shouldn't leave out Quebec. In fact, the Quebec government, and they're very unanimous on it in their legislature there as well. They just came out with a big report on human trafficking, calling on the federal government to do more. So it's each level of government is doing their part, but of course everyone can step up to a little bit more. The other one I would just want to mention as well, and this is not necessarily government, but several cities are doing amazing work. In Calgary, there's the Not in My City campaign, which is led by Paul Brandt, and they've gotten the airport on board, the tourism industry on board, the hotel chains coming online. They've been doing amazing work there, and I really commend them. And so folks that want to get involved and help battle human trafficking, there is organizations in every city that are doing this good work. And Not in My City in Calgary is close to home, and it's one of the best ones that I've seen. And so you're welcome to get involved with them. But there is smaller organizations dotting across the landscape that 2 or 3 people run and operate the whole thing, and they do yeoman's work as well.
Yeah. When it comes to human trafficking, do we have any idea how large of a problem it is in Canada?
Yeah, so so when it's human trafficking, there's kind of like two areas of it. So there's like the sex trafficking, prostitution side of it, and then you have the labor trafficking. in Canada, its vast majority of it would be sex trafficking. Those are the cases that get broke most often. That the numbers, just the way they are, it's probably like a 90-10 relationship on that. But because it is somewhat like, it's difficult to tell between a girl that's being trafficked and a girl who's walking around with her boyfriend. It's hard to gauge, right? So few organizations are ready to tackle the number. Although the Dutch government, they've come out with an annual report as to human trafficking worldwide, and they estimate somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people caught up in human trafficking in Canada. What we do know is from the arrests that happen of people that are trafficking people, the victims are 97% young and female, and 50% of them are First Nations. And
wow,
yeah, so that's a big challenge. And the other thing they seem to get moved across the country back and forth, get them out of their natural habitat where they have friends and relatives to rely on, and move them across the country. And so it's a lot of movement, is no doubt, hence the trafficking piece, but also, and the average trafficking victim is worth nearly, on average, $300,000 per year to their trafficker. It's a big business. There's lots of money in it. And that for me, that's the big piece. If we can solve that piece, we can solve most of it, right? We can get the money out of it. So, and how do you do that? You reduce the demand, right?
Yeah.
And so I say this all the time. I say, smoking is to cancer what porn use is to human trafficking, right? Yeah. Yeah. Your porn use is the marketing material. It's the thing that drives you to it. Not only that, it's also many of the girls that are being trafficked, there's times of the day where they can't make money, and so they start shooting porn in order to maintain a revenue stream, right? And so that comes out over and over again, is that on Pornhub in particular, the content that's being put up, there's a verification of the person that's putting it up, but there's no verification of whether the person whose images are up there, who's being portrayed in the video, if she's consenting, or who she is, right? The uploader is verified, but the person in the video is not. So that's where the connection really is made. But yeah, if there was no one out there to buy the product that's being sold, the $300,000 per trafficking victim would be reduced, and there wouldn't be as big as money in it, and these people would go and find other business to take care of, right? So.
Well, and I think that's a misconception when you look at Christians and when you look at conservatives and this push against pornography and things like that, is people tend to think, these people are stuffy in some way, shape, or form. They don't want us to see things that are available to us. But what people aren't getting, and the connection they're not making, is all of the things that viewing funds, and all of the things all of the travesty that it allows to occur, because people have that interest, because they're getting those clicks, the whole 9 yards, right? Because like you said, it's the demand that's driving it. And as long as people are logging onto these websites, that demand is going to be there, and they're going to fill it, and they're going to continue to exploit young women, children, things like that in the process of doing it, right?
Yeah. So I would say, think before you click. Is your click contributing to someone's exploitation somewhere else in the country or the world, right?
Now, when it comes to another thing I find interesting, Arnold, is the prioritization of our government and the way they have these pet projects. And again, like you mentioned, firearms. Firearms is one of them that we're on the verge of spending billions of dollars to solve no problems. And they stand up and they prop themselves up as the heroes of the country, because they're going to take down this thing that's actually not driving any harm, that's not hurting anybody, and only target the peaceful firearms owners. And there's this huge elephant in the room of human trafficking. Up to 15,000 young women, half of them First Nations, and they're like, there's only a few people talking about it. You'd think our fearless leader, the self-proclaimed feminist, would actually have some interest in this, but I haven't heard him talk about it. The hypocrisy with this group is just absolutely incredible to me.
Yeah, I guess I would echo that as well. I would just say that the governing is hard work, and that has been a challenge for it, and it came out already right when this government became the government, when Justin Trudeau said that the budget will balance itself. Right, is a complete denial of the fact that like governing takes effort. There's hard work to be done with it. Right, like the budget doesn't balance itself, and fighting human trafficking doesn't happen on its own, right? And that kind of thing, that kind of sentiment runs itself through in every direction. Whether it's the firearms case, is that it's easy to take firearms away from law-abiding citizens. It's a whole lot harder to get firearms out of the hands of gangsters. It looks like you're doing something when you're taking firearms out of the hands of law-abiding citizens, because when you demand it, they show up and they turn them in. When you demand a gangster come in and turn in his firearms, well, he's already breaking the law in a host of different ways. Why would he do that? And that's the challenge, right, that we're dealing with, is that it's hard work. It's hard work to get the things done that need to get done, and we have to stand up and do them.
Well, it's this weird. I don't know if I'd call it a phase, or it's this zone we've entered in the Western world where we do everything by virtue now. It's no longer what's effective and what matters and what's going to actually have an impact on anything. I mean, I can do 1,000 things that make you think I'm doing good things, and none of them do anything to the bottom line. Or you can do that one thing where you have to get dirty, you have to work hard, and you're not going to get a ton of recognition for it. And nobody wants to do that anymore. It's that it almost comes back in a way to that whole concept of hard work and how that's being lost on society nowadays as well. Everybody wants the quick virtue. They want to just let everybody know how awesome they are and how much they care. And then they go home and they sleep well at night. They're not putting in any extra time. I had this conversation with my 10-year-old recently, and he was getting really interested in robotics. Is something that he likes. And he keeps jumping to, he wants the biggest, flashiest, coolest looking robot arm that he can get his hands on to build. And that's something, it's hard, but it's something that I'm trying to kind of form a concept of in his mind. Is you've got to start with the little stuff. You've got to start working hard at it. You've essentially got to put potentially thousands of hours into something before you get there. And that's the thing, is all these people want to short circuit the system, and they want to get the credit for doing the big thing, when in fact they've done nothing at all. They haven't put in any time. Yeah,
no, that's deep there. That's the truth, I suppose. And like we've seen that as well. Like the media has gone after some other politicians in this country who have made hard decisions and then have been questioned about it, and they said, hey, like that's the job of governing, right? You have to make the decision of what's best for the country and what might not be popular in the moment.
Now, another piece that comes up often when we talk about this stuff, Arnold, is decriminalization. And people tend to think, and specifically on the liberal or the left side of the spectrum, that if you just basically decriminalize everything, it'll have a positive impact on society. To me, it comes back to that view that if we have less laws, then you're going to technically see less crime. But you're still going to have all the same things happening in society. From your perspective, this conversation around decriminalization, what impact would that actually have on sexual exploitation and, and that whole human trafficking piece in Canada?
Yeah, so there's a number of jurisdictions that have tried it already, with, in my opinion, disastrous results. To sum it up, I would say if Canada goes the route of decriminalization, we will become America's brothel. I know that sounds harsh, but that is the reality. And that's essentially what's happened to Germany. They've decriminalized there as well, and they have now become Europe's brothel. Right? Human trafficking exploitation hasn't been reduced at all. In fact, it's increased, but it's now become concentrated. It's no longer, doesn't happen to as great of an extent in other countries any longer. It all just migrated to Germany. They went from having an estimated 70,000 women being prostituted to over 700,000 being prostituted now, right? And so that's the reality. The other jurisdiction that I'm familiar with as well is the state of Victoria in Australia. They've gone decriminalization as well, with similar results. The numbers of the girls being prostituted has gone skyrocketed, and interestingly, the argument always is that, well, now look at government services, they'll get their EI and their CPP paid for, and they can unionize and all this kind of thing. Now, there's been a couple of interesting things that have happened. One is that any Australian native, someone born in Australia, Australian citizens, they have all seem to have exited the being prostituted, and now it's just virtually exclusively Southeast Asian girls, which kind of seems to insinuate that they're being trafficked in. The other thing that's also a little bit interesting about it is in Germany, where they were told that they could register for government, like the social safety net there. They're basically get a social insurance number for the Canadian equivalent. After that happened, there's only, you can count on two hands. There's been 7 people that have registered as that is their profession, and that they want all the government services. So even while it's been touted that, well, it will just make it normal work and everybody will register for the government services and all this kind of stuff, it hasn't happened.
Yeah. It's almost like when they do this, they just create this umbrella where these traffickers can operate with impunity, and it just attracts more of that. So instead of getting it spread around, you've just got a more concentrated level of human trafficking taking place in one area, right? Yeah.
And so there's no doubt there are a number of girls in the world that choose to sell their bodies. I'm not gonna get into a big argument with people about that, because every time you say that there isn't, they'll find somebody that says that there is. So I have no doubt that there are. But I also could probably find somebody in this country that would sell their kidney, right?
Yeah.
For the right amount of money, I might sell my kidney. But the point being is that we don't allow people to sell their kidneys in this country for fear that poor people would be exploited and saying, hey, here, I'll give you $1 million, you give me your kidney, right? Yeah. We don't allow that. Your kidneys are not for sale. We also in this country don't allow you to buy my vote or your vote, right? Our votes are not for sale. I can't go to Rob and say, Rob, can you vote for me in the next election? Here's $5 if you vote for me. That is illegal. You also can't come to me as a member of parliament and say, hey, Arnold, there's this important vote coming up in the House of Commons, and I'd really like you to vote this way. If you voted this way, here's $50,000, right? Make it happen. That is illegal. So there are already a number of things that are illegal for me to buy or sell. My kidneys and my vote being 2 of them. And in Canada as well, you are not allowed to purchase sex. That is illegal, because we are fearful of the risks of human trafficking. We're fearful of the for the fact that there's $300,000 a year possibly made on this, that we don't want people being exploited for the sake of money. So we say, hey, this is something that you're not allowed to purchase. It's the same as you're not allowed to purchase my kidney and you're not allowed to purchase my vote.
Yeah.
So
I
attempt to make that argument more often, but
when we talk about vulnerable communities, I mean, and you're hitting it right on the head. Is there's a whole lot of communities, there's a whole lot of demographics within Canada that are at a high risk of being susceptible to this human trafficking and sexual exploitation, because of those socioeconomic conditions that they're living in. And, when we get on the subject of missing and murdered Indigenous women, I think that's a big part of the conversation that goes unnoticed. People tend to, and this is just from my perspective, people tend to equate that to things that happen within their communities and things like that. And almost in a sense, like, it just doesn't get enough attention even on that level. I mean, the point I tend to make is I always hear this argument about murdered and missing Indigenous women. And it's like, yeah, but it's like, it's the community's rife with this violence and this is happening. And it's like, in any other community, it's people within the community doing it as well, right? It's not like people fly in and do this. It's the same problem as everywhere. It just doesn't get the focus and attention that it needs. And when you look at the sex trafficking piece, specifically when we're talking about the missing portion of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, I don't think people clue into how big of a contribution to that problem sexual exploitation and human trafficking actually is.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the stats bear it out in of the victims that we know about, right? Because many of them we may never know about, but of the victims that we know about, 50% of them are First Nations, right? Those are human trafficking victims that we know about. They're not part of the missing Indigenous women that we have in this country because we don't know where those girls are. But what I do always say to people, human trafficking is happening within 10 blocks of where you live, and so open your eyes. It's all around us, and it's something that we can all together battle against if we can recognize the signs and do our part, and don't be contributing to the demand side of it, right? That's an important piece as well.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and you and I had a brief conversation about it before the call, and it's like it almost takes on a whole different meaning when you start having children and you start hearing, there's almost like a level of, you hear it, but you're not really plugged into the conversation a whole bunch. But then, I've got a young daughter. You see what some of these young girls have gone through that have actually committed suicide because of what's happened to them. You think about these poor young girls that are being exploited, that are being taken out of their communities and trafficked potentially all over the world. And it just breaks your heart to hear about it. And again, for me, that's the big concern for me is, how are we setting our children up, and, how do we make things better? And the direction society is going, it's not headed for the better. And it just doesn't seem like at a federal level, we're getting the concern and we're getting the level of support that something like this should have. I mean, really, you look at the gun problem. Again, they're looking at spending billions of dollars on something that will solve literally zero problems on the peaceful, law-abiding firearms community. And they don't even bat an eye at 15,000 people being trafficked within Canada. They don't even mention it, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already there, Rob, but the big thing that spurred me onto this was the Rotea Parsons story. She was 14-year-old girl that committed suicide when she was 17 after images of her appeared on the internet after she was raped at a party. And that was kind of the big motivation for how I got involved in this. But one of the reasons that probably struck me as much as it did at the time was I did have a brand new little baby girl at home. And that definitely changes. That was my first daughter, first child, and that changes your perspective on everything. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Now, Arnold, just this is a different type of question, but like if if you had a magic wand and you could just solve it all, what's the biggest thing that you think could be done to get us on the right path to fixing this problem?
Whew, that's a tough one there, Rob. The Yeah, I think if I just like probably turn off sexually explicit material on the internet. I think if I could just turn that off, wave my magic wand. I think there's
Cut the
so
demand,
much about, yeah, I cut the demand, but also just like the challenges around like girls with their own image and the expectations that they have, and then also expectations that boys have. It just defend the dignity of our daughters and the spirit of our boys, right? That's what this is all about. And if yeah, you see the stats around loneliness and depression, and people like the one stat I read recently is that like people don't say that they have a best friend anymore and stuff like that. The loneliness that's happening, right? I'm a really outgoing social guy and I have lots of friends, but I grew up in a different era. I remember when the internet showed up, right? I remember when YouTube showed up. On a Friday night, if you wanted to see your friends, you literally had to drive to their house, right? That was the thing. Getting my driver's license was like a huge deal for me, right? And so my connections to people were lots of face-to-face interactions, and it's just we're living in the greatest social experiment of history. This whole Pornhub, you can get your rocks off on the internet kind of thing. What is that doing? What is that doing? And then you have thousands of years. What was it? Pornhub puts up their stats every year, is like how many hours people have spent looking at their screen kind of thing. And in 2016, it was something like 12 minutes for every man, woman, and child on the face of the planet, right?
Wow.
Like it's like 572 years worth of content, right? And much of this stuff is like just straight up rape. It's not the depiction of rape, it's straight up rape. And so when the folks talk about rape culture, I'll say, yeah, I agree, we're building a rape culture when we're all concerned about the 30-minute advertisement that might happen to our kids at the beginning of a 13-minute video. We think that the 13-minute advertisement might have an effect on our children, but not the 13-minute video after that. I think like the world's gone a little bit crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another good point you raised, though, is like, it's not like in all these instances, women are just being kidnapped in the dead of night and taken and human trafficked. I mean, it's not what people think it is. I don't think it is anyways.
No,
I think it probably resembles a lot more some societal drivers that put people in a state of mind that they're susceptible to be taken advantage of. And then they gradually slide into that situation. It's not, boom, all of a sudden you're being sexually exploited. Again, there's a lot of drivers that go into what breaks somebody down to the point that they move in that direction. And again, I think that's what's lost is this trafficking piece. It's not this big clear thing where there's vans driving around just plucking women off the street. It's all of these little bits and pieces that feed into that depression and that low self-esteem, and all of a sudden, they get involved with these people, and that maybe they get some attention, they get to feel good, and they just get duped into it, man. And before they know it, they can't get out. Yeah, no, that's exact. Like the vast majority of the cases, it's their new boyfriend. They're getting new gifts that they could never afford, right? So those are the signs, right? If there's significant personality change, there's a whole new group of friends that they're suddenly hanging out with. They've got new items, new clothing, new makeup, new shoes, a new car, a new apartment, all these kinds of things. And that typically is their new boyfriend lines them up with all these new things. And then
then all of a sudden one day the bill comes due, essentially, and saying, hey, I've run out of money, I need to pay for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Here, if you do this, we could help pay for it, right? And that's typically how that's all starts. And it's, it can happen to anybody. There's no while the typical like social indicators are still typical. There one story I heard about a gal in Montreal. She's 12 years old, and her parents thought she was going off to school every day until their school phoned and said, hey, your daughter hasn't showed up for like 10 days now. Do you know where she's at? And they're like, no, we thought she was going to school every day. And it turned out she was being trafficked during school hours.
Wow.
And 12. So 12 years. Yeah, 12. 12 is pretty common, actually.
Oh.
Like, afraid to say. So that's that again, that whole demand piece, it makes you a little sick. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Well, Arnold, I want to thank you for the work you're doing. Again, it's not nearly as big of a conversation as it needs to be in society, and I can definitely appreciate you stepping up and doing this and taking this on and trying to fight it and actually make a difference for a lot of these women. Again, it's not platitudes. You guys are putting in the work, and you guys realize the hard work that's required in moving this forward. And I think you have seen quite a bit of success. I mean, on that demand side of things, like you said, how much Pornhub removed from their site based on the pressures that were coming down on them. You can make a clear link between a lot of the pressure that, on the political side of things that's been applied that actually delivered that result, right?
Yeah, and hey, Rob, things like this help get the awareness out. Every time we add a few more soldiers to the fight, eventually we'll win it, right? So thanks so much.
Awesome.
It's been a real pleasure.
Okay, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in for the conversation. Again, we'll be dialing in again next Wednesday night with another guest. Appreciate all the support, everybody, and again, if you have the chance, give this a share. Let's help get this message out to as many people as possible.